Then I sign it, or I'll chop off your dad's fingers and mail them to you, one by one. Marcus's leather shoe pressed down on my sheet music, the sole smeared with slushy snow. It was a contract selling my freedom, dressed up as a piano tuner employment agreement. I stared at the 7 zeros in the penalty clause. Yet, what filled my ears was something else.
Not Marcus's shrill shouting, but the ticking of his wristwatch.
Click! Click!
Fast and frantic, like some dying insect.
I'll do it! I picked up the pen and signed my name. Marcus laughed. The sound scraped my nerves like fingernails on a chalkboard.
Smart girl, remember?
Elias Vance is a madman. If he doesn't kill you, you'd better get his new score. He shoved a black card into my collar, his fingers brushing my collarbone on purpose.
That's the last inheritance of the Vance family. Bring it back, and your father's debt is wiped clean.
I walked out of the agency, and the blizzard swallowed me whole. Vance Manor sat on the edge of a cliff, like a black coffin. The front door wasn't locked, or rather, no one dared to come in. I pushed open the heavy oak door. A sharp metallic smell rushed at me. Not rust. Blood. The hall was dark, lit only by the dying embers in the fireplace, glowing red. Get out. The voice slammed down from the shadows of the second floor, hoarse beyond belief, as if his throat were full of broken glass. I looked up and saw a man standing by the railing, bare-chested, half his torso wrapped in bandages, a hunting knife hanging from his hand, dark drops falling from its edge. Elias Vance, once the prince of the piano, now a devil out of hell.
He couldn't hear me speak, but I could hear him. I heard the roar of blood racing through his body, the dry scrape of bone against bone.
And that sound, zzz, zzz.
A piercing, high-frequency ringing, drilling into his brain day and night.
No wonder he was losing his mind. At that pitch, a normal person would smash their own head just to make it stop. The knife's tip pressed against my throat. The cold sent goosebumps racing over my skin. Elias looked down at me from above, his eyes like he was staring at a lamb waiting for slaughter. Marcus sent someone who isn't afraid to die this time. He sneered and flicked his wrist. The blade nicked my skin, and a bead of blood slid down. The pain snapped me awake. I watched the corner of his eye twitch in sharp spasms, early sign of tinnitus flaring up. So I made a sound. Not speech, not a scream, a steady, low, foul. My vocal cords vibrated at a very specific frequency. It was a talent I discovered as a child. I could imitate the resonant frequency of almost anything. Elias's hand froze. The violence in his eyes congealed, replaced by stunned disbelief. The knife clattered to the floor. He lunged forward not to shove me away, but to clamp a hand around my neck. "Don't stop!" His voice trembled, like a traveler in the desert spotting water. "Keep going. That sound. Do it again." I was close to choking, but I didn't dare stop. I adjusted the frequency, shifting from chest resonance to head resonance. It was a kind of inverse wave, one that canceled out high-pitched noise. Elias went slack, as if the line had been pulled out, and his weight collapsed against me. He buried his head at the base of my neck, his rough breathing brushing my skin. "It's gone on to her," he muttered, gripping my shoulder so hard his nails nearly broke the skin. "That cursed drilling sound, it's gone on to her." We stayed locked in that dangerous, intimate position in the dead silent hall, until the air in my lungs ran out and the sound cut off. Elias jerked his head up. That maddening pain surged back across his face. He slammed me against the wall, his eyes burning with hunger. "Who are you?" he shouted, so loud it was frightening he couldn't hear his own voice. I opened my mouth to say I was a sound engineer. He didn't look at my lips at all. He yanked open my collar and pressed his ear against my collarbone. "Talk! Anything! Hurry!" "Maddenin! Of pie!"
Terrified, I stammered out multiplication tables. 1 times 1 is 1, 1 times 2 is 2. As my voice vibrated, Elias's expression slowly smoothed from savage to calm. There was even a trace of unhealthy fascination. He closed his eyes, soaking in my voice like an addict. "Got you," he murmured by my ear, his breath warm against my skin. "You're my medicine, Clara, and for the rest of your life, you're not walking out that door." I became Elias's personal attachment. The nature of this job changed completely. It wasn't tuning a piano anymore, it was tuning a person. Late at night, heavy rain hammered against the windows. There was no bed in Elias's bedroom, only a carpet and scattered sheets of music. He couldn't sleep. The ringing in his ears made him so irritable he looked like he wanted to tear the walls apart. "Come here!" He sat barefoot on the carpet and patted his thigh. I hesitated, unable to move. That posture was unbearably humiliating. "Do you want your dad to die?" He understood my resistance and threw out the killing line with icy calm. Marcus threatened me. Now he did too. Clenching my teeth, I walked over and stiffly straddled his legs. He wrapped an arm around my waist and pulled me down until there was no space between us. "Closer," he ordered, pressing the back of my head so my throat rested against the side of his neck. This was the best position for bone conduction. Sound passed through my throat and bones, straight into his neck, and onto his hearing. "Read." He tossed me a dense music theory book. I began to read aloud, my voice shaking. "A cool temperament is dividing the octave." With every word, my vocal cords vibrated. Those vibrations traveled through bone and into his body. Elias let out a quiet, satisfied breath. His hand moved restlessly, sliding along my back section by section. It wasn't flirtation, more like inspecting the structure of an instrument. "Here, the frequency is off." His fingers pressed against my lower back, cold to the touch. "Relax, you're too tense. The sound is tight." Humiliation flooded me and tears dropped onto his shoulder. He felt the dampness and looked up at me. There was no pity in his eyes, only detached scrutiny. "Why are you crying?" He wiped away my tears with his thumb, then tasted them. Tears have frequency too. The sound they make when they fall is in C minor. He was insane, completely insane. "Keep reading, until I fall asleep." He rested his head back against my neck. That night, I read until my voice went hoarse. Only at dawn did he finally fall asleep, clutching the edge of my clothes like a child. I looked at his handsome but pale face. While Elias was fast asleep, I slipped into the music room. The scarred Steinway he had slashed stood alone in the center. Maka said the score was inside the piano. I lifted the lid. Inside was a mess. Half the strings had been cut. Knife marks covered the soundboard. But I could hear it. Even without playing, I could hear this piano's memory. Resonance lingered inside the wood. I reached deep into the body of the piano, feeling around. My fingertips brushed against a hidden layer. There really was something there. My heart started racing as I carefully pulled out a stack of yellowed papers. They weren't sheet music. They were journals. And a medical report. By the moonlight, I skimmed through them quickly. The more I read, the harder my hands shook.
The car accident was not an accident. The brake line was cut. Hearing damage is irreversible, but someone tampered with the medication, worsening the ringing. It was signed by Elias's attending physician, dated 3 years ago. And that doctor is now Marcus's personal consultant. I flipped to the last page. A single line was scrawled in blood. Marcus doesn't want the score. He wants my life. Clara, if you see this, run. My head buzzed as if it might explode. Elias had known who I was all along. He also knew what Marcus sent me here to do. Yet he still kept me by his side. Why? Because he wanted to die, but not alone.
Or was he asking for help? Suddenly, an icy hand closed around my wrist. I spun around in terror. Elias was standing behind me. I didn't know when he'd arrived. He didn't look at the papers at all. He stared straight into my eyes. The violence from before was gone, replaced by a hollow, hopeless sorrow. "Seen enough?" he asked me with his lips. I was about to explain when he suddenly pulled my hand down and pressed it onto the keys. Only a few of them could still make a sound. Guiding my fingers, he struck a broken sequence of notes, sad, desperate, and heartbreakingly beautiful. In that instant, I understood. This was the new score. It wasn't written on paper at all. It was a farewell carved into his mind. Just then, my phone vibrated. Marcus had sent a photo. In it, my adoptive father was tied to a chair, his face bloody, a hammer hovering above his fingers. "Your last chance, Clara. Do it." I looked at the photo, then at the battered man standing in front of me. At that moment, I woke up. I had always thought I was here to repay a debt. In truth, I was a knife Marcus handed to Elias, and also an excuse Elias handed back to Marcus. We were all just pieces on the board. I slammed the piano lid shut and twisted Elias's fingers back in my grip. "I'm done. I'm flipping the board." "You're shaking." Elias didn't pull away. Instead, his fingers closed around my clenched fist. He couldn't read the tangled look in my eyes, but he could feel how wildly my pulse was racing. "Did Marcus force you?" He asked it bluntly, his voice hoarse, like sandpaper. I didn't answer. I raised my phone and slammed it into the corner of the wall right in front of him. The screen shattered. Marcus's threats and that brutal photo went dark with it. Elias froze. Outside, the blizzard howled against the windows. The lights in the manor flickered twice, then went out completely. The power was gone. Darkness swallowed everything, leaving only the faint glow of the fireplace. Darkness makes the ringing worse. Elias clutched his ears in pain, a raw animal sound tearing out of his throat. He started slamming into the wall, once, then again. "Stop it, Elias!" I rushed forward, but he was terrifyingly strong and shoved me aside. I crashed into the leg of the piano, pain shooting through me, but I didn't stop. I dragged myself up and lunged at him again, wrapping myself around his waist like an octopus. "Listen to me! Listen!" I pressed my lips to his ear and forced my voice into that specific frequency. Lower than A440, in the key of the frequency that soothes the soul. I sang in the dark. I sang the broken melody he had just played with me. It was the song inside his heart. Only I could sing it. Elias's struggle slowly faded. Drenched in cold sweat, he slid down until he was sitting on the floor, completely spent. I cradled his head and pressed his ear against my chest. Thump, thump, thump. The most primitive rhythm in the world, a heartbeat. "You shouldn't have saved me," he said in the darkness, his voice fragile, like a child's. "I'm useless, Clara.
I can't hear music. All I hear is hell. I stroked his damp hair, tears slipping down without a sound. You can hear. I took his hand and pressed it to my throat, speaking each word slowly. As long as I'm alive, you can hear.
Of 3 days when the blizzard sealed off the mountain, or time we stole for ourselves, Elias began teaching me composition. He couldn't hear, but he remembered the vibration of every note. He traced staff lines on my back with his fingertips, and I answered with soft humming to match the pitch.
We created a language that belonged only to the two of us.
The unfinished silent sonata finally gained its last measure. This is for you. He handed me the neatly organized manuscript, his gaze so gentle it made my heart tremble. Take it to Marcus. Trade it for your father's life. I stared at him in shock. And you? Without this, Marcus will destroy you. Elias smiled, a look of calm resolve in it. I was already ruined, as long as you're free. Pain twisted through my chest like a knife. He was squeezing out the last of his worth, just to clear a path for me. At that moment, the gates of the manor were smashed open. The roar of engines shattered the quiet. Marcus had arrived. He came with a squad of bodyguards in black, like vultures crashing into our territory.
A touching love story!
Marcus clapped as he walked into the music room, a sickening fake smile on his face. Behind him, 2 guards dragged in an elderly man covered in injuries. If you have like you and I easy to his tag, I clowned and screamed and street in a Bruno and that deaf, and scrapped in similar mages and you opposite his fan.
I deaf guy.
I screamed and tried to rush forward, but Elias yanked me behind him. Don't touch her! Elias stood in front of me, gripping the hunting knife in his hand. Marcus clicked his tongue, pulled out his phone, and played a recording. It was my voice. The lie I'd recorded on my first day at the manor, to steady Marcus.
Don't worry. That deaf guy is easy to fool. I'll get the score, then dump him.
The recording echoed through the empty music room, every word like a poisoned barb. Elias's back went rigid. He slowly turned around to look at me. The warmth in his eyes froze in an instant, turning into bone-deep. You're insane! Marcus screamed and lunged for the fireplace, trying to save the papers. But the flames were too strong. They turned to ash in seconds. If you don't want to live, then go die. Marcus, shaking with rage, waved his hand, and the bodyguards surged forward. Elias didn't fight back. He was like a soulless puppet, letting the blows rain down on him.
Stop, please, stop!
I cried and threw myself over him, shielding him with my body. Marcus grabbed my hair and dragged me away. You filthy woman! You are not getting out of this, either. He slapped me hard. My ears rung. Elias collapsed on the floor, his face smeared with blood. But when he saw me pinned under Marcus's foot, the last bit of light in his eyes went out. Suddenly he burst free with shocking strength, shoving the guards aside. He didn't go for Marcus. He ran for the piano. He seized the sharp metal rod used for tuning. Ilang demais ses pais not any bull, shirden what threw in pocket. Elias looked at me and curled his lips into a cruel smile. If everything I hear is a lie, he said softly, then there's no need to hear any more. A dull, sickening sound followed. Without hesitation, he drove the metal rod into his own ear. Blood stilled rapidly, soaking his white shirt and blurring my vision. In that instant, the world fell completely silent. Marcus was frozen in shock and stumbled back a few steps. "Madman! He's a madman!" Elias lay in a pool of blood, his eyes empty as he stared at the ceiling. At last he could no longer hear that drilling noise. And he could no longer hear my cries. In the most final way possible, he severed the only connection between us. I died too. At that moment, as he fell, the girl named Clara died with him. Nuts! Elias was sent to the ICU, his life hanging by a thread. Marcus told the outside world it was self-harm caused by mental instability. He forged a power of attorney and took over all the Vance family assets. I was thrown out of the estate, dumped into the snow like a piece of trash. My adoptive father was sent to a nursing home. He survived, but his mind was gone. I stood outside the hospital's glass window, looking at Elias lying there, his body covered in tubes. His ears were wrapped in thick layers of gauze, like a broken doll. The doctor said his auditory nerves were completely destroyed. He would never hear another sound for the rest of his life. Even bone conduction was useless. I didn't cry. My tears had already run dry. I touched the piano string ring he had given me in my pocket. The wire cut into my fingertip. The sharp pain kept me clear-headed. Marcus thought he had won. He thought that by destroying Elias's ears, I would become useless. But he forgot that I still had ears. I had a pair of ears that could hear the sounds of hell. I wiped the blood from my face and turned into the wind and snow. I was going to take back what belonged to us. The first stop was Marcus's office. Late at night, the building was completely empty. I avoided the cameras and stood in front of the massive safe. This was Marcus's pride and joy, his absolutely secure vault. No password, only fingerprints and retinal scans. But I didn't need any of that. I pressed my ear to the cold metal door and slowly turned the dial with my fingers. Click! An incredibly faint sound of tumblers catching. To anyone else, it would have been silence. To me, it was deafening. Left 3, right 7, back 2. Inside my mind, the internal structure of the lock took shape. 10 minutes later. The heavy safe door popped open. Inside were not only Elias's original contracts, but also Marcus's money laundering ledgers, and the driver's testimony from that car accident years ago. It really was him. I had to see Elias. Even if he couldn't hear, I had to see him. Disguised as a nurse, I slipped into the intensive care unit. The room held nothing but the steady beeping of machines. Elias was awake. His eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling, empty and lifeless. I walked to the bedside and gently took his hand. His whole body jolted. He turned his head sharply. When he saw it was me, his pupils constricted. Instinctively, he tried to pull his hand away. He still hated me. I didn't let go. Instead, I turned his palm upward and began to write, stroke by stroke. Marcus will pay the price. He watched my movements. The hatred in his eyes slowly shifted into confusion. I kept writing. I have the evidence, but I need you. He let out a silent sneer. Though no sound came, I understood the shape of his words. I'm already useless. I took a deep breath and did something bold. I leaned down and pressed my lips against the pulse at his wrist. I hummed a melody. It was the climax of the Silence Sonata. Through his pulse the vibrations traveled into his bloodstream. Weak, but impossible not to feel. Sure enough, his fingers trembled. He stared at me in disbelief. I lifted my head, met his gaze, and spoke with my lips.
You can't hear the world, but you can hear me. Listen with your heartbeat.
The dead ash in Elias's eyes flickered back to life. He flipped his hand over and gripped mine, shockingly strong. In my palm he wrote a single word: kill.
In that moment, we formed a new pact. No longer a trade of money and bodies, but an alliance of revenge. Marcus was about to unveil Elias's posthumous work at a globally live-streamed music gala. He had found a stand-in, masked and seated at the piano. This will be the final echo of the Vance family. Standing beneath the spotlight, Marcus basked in the thunderous applause. He thought Elias was still lying unconscious in a hospital bed. Until the doors of the hall were pushed open, I rolled in a wheelchair. Seated in it was Elias, dressed in a black formal suit. The entire hall erupted. Marcus's smile froze. "Security, throw these two lunatics out," he roared into the microphone. "Who dares?" I took a microphone, my voice cutting coldly through the venue. "The real creator is right here. Who do you want to play?" The crowd began to shout, and reporters' flashes went wild. Marcus was trapped, grinding his teeth as he sneered. "Fine, let him play. A deaf man, I'd like to see how he manages." He was certain Elias couldn't hear a thing and was incapable of performing. I wheeled Elias up to the Steinway. He sat down, his long fingers brushing the keys. He didn't need to hear. I stood behind him, one hand resting on his shoulder, not to comfort him but to act as his metronome. My fingers tapped lightly against his shoulder blade in time. For him, this tactile signal was more precise than sound. Elias took a deep breath, and his hands came down hard. Boom. The first chord crashed out like a bolt of thunder. It was rage, accusation, a roar from the depths. Marcus's face went deathly pale. This wasn't the score he had stolen. It was brand new, a melody bristling with lethal intent. Every note was like a blade slicing into Marcus's nerves. As the music surged toward its climax, the giant screen suddenly changed. No longer close-ups of the performance, but the ledgers and confessions I had taken from the safe. The hall fell into stunned silence, then exploded with gasps. Marcus lunged for the control booth like a madman. Cut it! Shut the power off! But it was too late. Police poured in through the side doors and pinned Marcus to the ground. The music kept going. Elias played on with his eyes closed. When Marcus was taken away, he was still hurling hysterical curses. No one paid him any attention. All the lights focused on the man in black. The final note fell. Elias's fingers rested on the keys, unmoving for a long time. Thunderous applause filled the hall, but he couldn't hear it. Slowly, he turned and looked at me behind him. In this noisy world, I was his only anchor. I crouched down until our eyes were level. "It's over, Elias." I mouthed the words to him. He looked at me, then suddenly reached out and touched my cheek. "No, it's just beginning." The words were a little slurred, but he really did speak 3 months later. Vance Manor had been renovated. The eerie red lights were replaced with warm yellow wall lamps. Although Elias's hearing never returned, he learned another way to sense the world. He developed a special vibration floor that could turn sound into sensations under the feet. And I became his personal translator. Right now, I stood at the edge of a cliff, watching waves crash against the rocks below. Elias wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on the top of my head. "What are you listening to?" He placed his hand against my throat, feeling my answer. "I'm listening to the sound of freedom." I smiled and held his hand. "That contract? I tore it up," he said suddenly. I froze and turned to look at him. "Then what about the money I owe you? 10 million?" Elias raised an eyebrow.
The face that once carried only gloom now brimmed with mischief. "Work it off." My face flushed, and I was just about to call him a shameless flirt. But he lifted my hand and kissed the ring made from a piano string. "Use your whole life to be my A440, he said, "my standard pitch. Everything in this world has a frequency. Some are harsh, some are beautiful. And we were two strings that were once out of tune. After breaking, rebuilding, and being tuned again, we finally resonated into the most perfect chord in the world." "Okay," I whispered. The vibration of my voice traveled through the air, through bone, through the soul, and into his heart. It was the only sound he could hear.